Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is the B&T Vers36 multi-caliber suppressor. Yes, technically every suppressor is multi-caliber. If it'll fit, you can send it. Of course, there's going to be restrictions on that. The manufacturers usually put those out there just because sometimes people get a little curious and they don't think about pressure or things like that. The Vers36 is a modular suppressor, being that it can be reduced in size, so you can make it longer, you can make it shorter, you can change out the end caps. And because it's hub compatible, you can change out a lot of your mounting. You can also run a captured Nielsen device piston on it for handguns, and you've got changeable end caps. So you can go from 223 to 36 to a 30 caliber specific end cap to cover all of the calibers that the Vers36 is supposed to be able to handle. I was interested in it because a lot of your multi-cal suppressors that run all the way up to like 338 or 300 drum or whatever, they'll mention pistols, but usually the pistol performance is less than desirable, which is unfortunate because a suppressor of this diameter and this potential length, if you add the additional baffles, could be a fantastic pistol suppressor, but it might not cycle correctly. So that was definitely something I was focused on when I was thinking about, well, okay, if it's multi-cal, let's see if it really does perform pistol caliber all the way up to rifle calibers. It's rated up to 360, weighs in at 7.4 or 11.3 ounces depending on which configuration you have it in. And it is titanium and it is 3D printed. So for practicality, when we're talking about maximum rating, you're looking at 338 Lapua Magnum or 350 Legend, which I did use it on. Although with my 350 Legend, I only shoot subsonic, so it's not as impressive as the pressures you get out of the supersonic rounds in the 350 Legend. You got your 5.7, you've got your 300 black, your 7.62x39, and obviously 9mm in pistol calibers. It uses their RBS system, which is a reduced back pressure system. You guys have seen videos I've done on B&T in the past where, or more recently I should say, where I talk a lot about the RBS system, and it does exist in this suppressor and it does function pretty well. Now, one of the big caveats on this suppressor is barrel length restrictions. They technically don't say you can't put it on shorter barrels. But they do say if you go below 10 inches, you're going to see increased erosion, which makes a lot of sense. And this is something that some people know about, some people don't. You see a video of a suppressor shooting, especially under night vision, but you see it under low light, and it can happen during the day too. If you're getting a lot of sparking, and not the first couple of hundred rounds, because some titanium suppressors, they have a break-in period. Maybe leftover particles from the manufacturing process. That first 100, 200 rounds, they have a sparking effect on higher pressure rounds. Not necessarily going to see it on a handgun, but you'll see it on a 5.56 or 308 or 300 black. If the suppressor has 1,000, 2,000 rounds on it and you're seeing that sparking, that's your suppressor eroding. That's your sacrificial baffle losing particulates every time you pull the trigger because of the pressure. And it could be a combination of other things as well. But it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just something you want to watch out for because the shorter the barrel, the more you will erode the inside of the suppressor, all things being equal. As far as modularity goes, one of the things I worry about with being able to take off a couple of baffles, 2 baffles, 3 baffles, whatever, is it really worth it? You see some suppressors, when you take off the additional baffles, you don't really notice at the shooter's ear a significant change in hearing. It doesn't feel like you lost much. So then you start asking, well, why not just sell it like this and not worry about this? With the Vers, it is a noticeable change. It also has an interesting change on recoil behavior. In a full configuration, it's a very soft shooting suppressor. When I remove these baffles, and it's not across the board, it just depends on a few guns, but for example, on a 300 black shooting supersonic in the shorter configuration, it's got a little bit more of an oomph to it. It's a little bit more insistent on the recoil pulse, but it behaves uniformly because of the forward or the reduced back pressure venting, all of the gas being vented forward out of the front, or as much gas as possible being vented forward out of the front. We'll talk more about that, of course. First thing I did with it is run it on a handgun, and a couple different handguns. And one of the more finicky handguns to run a suppressor on it can be the Beretta. and it functioned fine, shooting 9mm 115 and 124, 124 plus P. Also ran on an FN 509, and I had no issues whatsoever with the functionality. I wasn't getting any slide drag, I wasn't getting any stutter. The Nielsen device, the captured Nielsen device that you can get or comes with it, performed as it should. So kind of for me, that was that initial box check, as I was getting that performance that I wanted out of a suppressed handgun on a multi-cal suppressor. I shot it in both configurations, both full and short, using the 36 cap, and then moved on kind of to rifles from there, because even though that's a box that I want to check with a suppressor that says it can shoot pistol calibers, to see if it actually does, in regards to a suppressor that's touted, like I said, as multi-cal, I was more interested in using on rifles. I don't shoot a lot of suppressed handgun just because it can be a little bit more cumbersome, and because I have PCCs and SMGs, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense anyway. Now, I don't really speak to a full auto rating. I don't say it's not full auto rated. And I've got an MP5K. So, yeah, I did a whole bunch of full auto. And keeping in mind, they did say that you would experience increased erosion on barrel lengths less than 10 inches. And that MP5K barrel is definitely less than 10 inches. I ran it in full and the shorter configuration, and it was fantastic. Yes, it was kind of going against the manufacturer's recommendation to run it on a barrel that short, but they didn't, I kind of feel like they had rifles in mind when they said that. And this is just a handgun. Now granted, handgun caliber, but I'm using it a lot more enthusiastically than you can a semi-auto, so to speak. But it held up fine. And one of the things that I was really focused on in the modularity design is something that can happen, or something that it's a significant risk, and the fact that these are threads, right? So if I'm running it in its full configuration, how are those threads holding up against the overall behavior of the suppressor during the cycle of fire? Will it come loose? Will it unthread? Will I have a thread failure, which I've had on suppressors in the past? And generally, if I'm going to run a modular suppressor really hard, I'm going to take off those additional baffles to eliminate that potential failure point, and I'm going to run it in a shorter configuration. And being perfectly honest, because suppressors are never going to be movie quiet, I generally run most suppressors in their short configuration anyway, especially for pistol calibers. Rifles may be a different conversation. But it held up just fine to that MP5, even though I ran it pretty damn hard during that particular period of evaluation. On 350 Legend, absolutely great performance. Granted, I'm shooting subsonic, but with the 350 Legend, the behavior isn't so much the suppression of the round as how it manages the energy of the round. And this is a little bit of nuance, but I've shot, my particular 350 Legend is a Howa 16-inch. And depending on the suppressor that's on it, I get strange recoil behavior. B&T Vers handled it perfectly well. It had a very pleasing tone, and I was pleasantly surprised when I mounted the suppressor, used a direct thread to mount it. Went ahead and did a zero check, because the zeros are going to shift between suppressors. I had to come up, I think I had to come up half MOA, and had to come right about a full MOA, and I was right back on zero for that 350 Legend shooting the subsonic rounds. Not a gun I shoot a whole lot, but it is one that I do enjoy, and I'd like to incorporate it into reviews when possible, because it's a fun gun to shoot. 350 Legend is kind of a round that's more relegated to people who have to hunt with straight roll cartridges. You don't really see it anywhere else, at least not in great abundance. But I like it because it shoots a really big bullet quietly. I like that super subsonic behavior that you get out of it, and I really wish someone would make a semi-automatic that shot 350 Legend that was very reliable. I haven't seen one yet. But anyway, that's kind of an aside. Moving on. Shooting it on a 5.56 Scar, the sparking during the day is very noticeable in long and in short configuration. But on that 300 black, it was pretty reasonable. And again, when I shot it on the 5.56 Gar, I used the 5.56 223 cap that comes with it. So it wasn't a cap issue. It wasn't an additional exit volume issue. Like shooting 223 through a 30 cal cap sometimes gives you a different muzzle signature. This wasn't that case. So even shooting 300 supersonic, it was there a little bit, but it was definitely more noticeable on the 223 5.56, which is kind of interesting. Now, the actual muzzle signature, I usually, as you guys know, measure at night. So I took that same gun, took my 300 black Scar, and did a night signature. A cold signature test is usually the ones that people are interested in. Again, this is not necessarily scientific. It's just dark, and I have the cameras on, and I shoot a number of rounds, cold gun, cold suppressor. Shot it first in the shorter configuration, let it cool down, put it back in the long configuration, shot it again. Muzzle signature is pretty good. Now, would it be different on the 223 5.56 or some other caliber doing the same test? It might be. But 300 black supersonic generally have a pretty good muzzle signature, absent any kind of devices intended to lessen that muzzle signature. So I think in this regard, the suppressor performed well. But it is interesting that on the 223 5.56, I was having some more noticeable daytime muzzle signatures. And you would think putting it on a 12.5 inch 308 like my Sons of Liberty Mark 10 would have a ridiculous muzzle signature. Not the case. Very strange experience to review this suppressor, how some rounds would have different behaviors and signatures than others. But it handled that 12.5 308 is probably one of the hardest guns I have on suppressors. Not necessarily in damaging them or destroying them or anything, but performance. That gun will eat any ammo I put in it, although I generally shoot 165 or 168 grain, and I have some 124 grain nonsense ammo that I'll shoot through it as well, like PMC or some of the stuff that comes out of Thailand. But it's zeroed and it's normally shot 168 grain. And the big thing is the recoil pulse, because it is a shortened SBR 308. Suppressor has to add a lot of control to make it worth it. And I know which suppressors perform the best on that gun, so I kind of, even though I don't want to, that is a bit of a comparison when I'm throwing other suppressors on it to see how it performs. The Vers36 performed fine, recoil management was great. I'm getting that straight direct rear to the push, which I think is attributable to the design of the suppressor as well as the quality of the materials in the suppressor and the general nature of how it's going to affect the gases that are coming out of that direct impingement SBR 308. For accuracy checks, and this is something that not everybody cares about, but it's something I always like to check. Am I going to have a return to zero on the suppressor? Well, for accuracy checks on this particular review, I used my Scar 20 with a Surefire 308 flash hider, and I used the Surefire hub system for the 7.62 in order to be able to mount the suppressor, collar it easily. Now, I know that hub system is rock solid. B&T uses a very similar system. In fact, if you look at the lineage of this particular hub mounting system, B&T did it first, Surefire did it later. Either way, and apparently there's a lawsuit going on around that right now if you're watching this video in, August of 2025. Anyway, the way this works, 100 yards, 5-round group with suppressor on. Then remove the suppressor and see if there is a zero shift. So yeah, that's a shift and it's kind of significant, but let's see if the gun returns to zero when we put the suppressor back on. Return to zero, fantastic. That is kind of a significant zero shift. Now, and again, I fired it in the full configuration. I did not take off the baffles and put the cap back on and see if that affected zero, at least on video, because I checked it during the review process and it was not even worth mentioning. It didn't cause any issues whatsoever. But the zero shift is significant, but it is repeatable. So if I take the suppressor back off, it's going to shoot that same group, put the suppressor back on, it's going to return to 0, and repeatability is huge. Usually the only time you see a loss in repeatability is in a really bad quality suppressor or a bad quality mounting system, or direct thread where you over torque one time and you don't torque quite as well the next time, because that pressure does matter. The harder you tighten something down, the more pressure it presses onto the barrel right there at the shoulder and the collar, and it can affect the harmonics of the barrel, which is going to throw up your 0, which is super aggravating. Because it's kind of hard to torque to spec on a direct thread unless you use a special wrench combination, or you just kind of go, I use tick marks, tick mark the barrel with some whiteout, so I know when I'm putting the suppressor back on after direct threading it, I know exactly where I need to thread it to. There's other systems you can use too. So how do I feel about the Vers36? Well, it's probably the first multi-cal suppressor that kind of lives up to that name. It performed well on handgun and handgun caliber PCCs. It handled all the calibers I shot through it. Again, I don't have every caliber, but 350 Legend, I threw that in there. 300 Black Super and subs. A lot of people only shoot subsonics, and I did that just for the tone, to hear how the can performs, and it has a fantastic tone shooting subsonic, and I shot a lot of subsonic through it. Not only 300 Black, but also 9mm and that 350 Legend. It's got good volume to it. It's not an ungainly, heavy, unmanageable suppressor. Even on a handgun, if you were going to use it in a handgun configuration, especially in the short configuration, it's not much larger than some of the other pistol cans that are out there, and it doesn't weigh, in fact, it's lighter than some of them, and it doesn't weigh more than most of the ones that you're normally going to see, even though pistol caliber cans usually come in at like a 1.5 or a 1, usually 1.5 diameter is pretty common. You do see some larger than that, and the larger volume definitely helps with the pistol as far as sound reduction. I'm more of a let's just get a caliber or let's just get a suppressor for the caliber. The whole idea of owning one suppressor to use on all different calibers has never really appealed to me, because there's a lot of maintenance that has to go into that, a lot of changing of parts and configurations and zeros and things like that. So for me, the idea of a multi-cal suppressor has never been super appealing. However, this one is pretty awesome. I think that their reduced back pressure system, in combination with a modular can that I can take, I can shorten or lengthen depending on what I'm using it for, and I get the changeable end caps, which either incidentally or on purpose have the Swiss flag on them. I think that's cool. I think it's a fantastic suppressor. If you need a suppressor for multiple calibers, this would definitely be one to consider. I personally would buy this suppressor just to use on, say, 308 or 350 Legend, or even 9mm as a pistol can, because it is pretty damn quiet in that size, especially for a PCC. I don't spend a lot of time shooting suppressed handguns, so it probably wouldn't spend a whole lot of time in that configuration, but it is useful to know that you can shoot it that way and it performs well. So I think the Vers36 is an excellent iteration. I think that they definitely put some attention to detail into the suppressor in having it meet the standards of being multi-cal. I would like to see them release one that has more of hard use in mind for people like me, like, full auto rating, no barrel restrictions, so on and so forth. But that's probably going to go against their baffle stack design, which may change the overall performance of the suppressor. And sometimes that's the trade-off that we make. Your suppressor performs the way that it does because if you put something in, you got to take something out sometimes. So as far as a 3D printed titanium suppressor, an overall performance modular suppressor that we can use across a wide degree, not only of calibers, but operating systems, the Vers36 is a fantastic option in that category. Till next time, Aaron Count Studies Dynamics, train accordingly.